File extensions matters in JavaScript. HTML files should have a .html extension. Do not forget that JavaScript just represents the functional parts or the logic behind things like the animation, foundation, and other movement interaction to development experience. So it works alongside HTML and CSS to other industries, even website or web frameworks, or web development pillars foundation. Now, file extension is very important, especially when you want to maybe a JavaScript file from the external source in your code or using an absolute URL that responds to the resource or another server. Now, you see that HTML file always have a .html extension. Shorten it to .html to still work and also to allow a Java HTML. CSS should have the CSS extension, and JavaScript should have a .js extension. This .js extension really matters when it comes to working with external JavaScript file. Or else, without a valid JavaScript extension, even if you have this whole word JavaScript code in a file, it will not work without the correct extension. So extension is very important and should be part of what one should pay attention to when working with the JavaScript programming language. Now let's talk about using lowercase file names. When you use lowercase file names for your file, let's look at some of the things that one should know and what one should be careful or avoid doing with that. Most web servers, Apache, Unix are case sensitive about files name. So there are some web servers like Apache used by PHP, they are case sensitive about file names. For example, if you have london.jpg as your image name, you cannot access that image by changing the small letter L to capital letter L. So to servers like this, it means two different things, not the same thing. So this really should be something of consideration when it comes to naming convention in your code. Now, other web servers, Microsoft IIS, are not case sensitive. And we also have other web servers that are more lenient. They are not case sensitive. For example, london.jpg in small letter can be accessed as london.jpg or london.jpg, and it still not post any error or give any error, and it will still work fine in your code. If you use a mix of upper and lower case, you have to be extremely consistent. If in your code you are following a convention of mixing both upper and lower case, you have to be extremely consistent. So you either stick with a lower case or you stick with upper case. Mixing the two together sometimes can lead you into conflict, especially when it comes to naming the variable declaration and naming conventions in your code. If you move from a case insensitive to a case sensitive server, even small error can break your website. You can imagine this, that just a file name alone is enough to break your website. If you move from a case insensitive server to a case sensitive server, a small error can break your website. So be consistent with the naming convention that you choose to employ in your code or in your project. To avoid this problem, always use lowercase file names if possible. Now, the recommended thing is that if you want to avoid all this server sensitivity when it comes to name and conventions problem, it is recommended that you always use lowercase file names. So this way, regardless of which server that you are on, you can always be 100% sure and certain that there will not be any issue with your use of name or with your use of case in your code or in your project. If you honest talked about performance, coding conventions are not used by computers. For most rules have little impact on the execution of program. So far, we've been talking about coding convention, we've been talking about style guide when it comes to working with JavaScript. And you may wonder that does this have any effect on execution or does it have any effect on the output that the JavaScript code will produce? The answer is simply it is shortly no, it does not. These conventions are not used by computers and they don't have any part on the execution of programs. The reason why all these things are recommended is for ease of maintenance of your code and for ease of troubleshooting or debugging in case there are bugs or there are issues in your code. When you have a small script, indentation and extra spaces are not significant. When you have a small script that JavaScript are easily processed, you don't need more emphasis on indentation or extra spaces. For code in development, readability should be preferred. If you have a code in development that has not gone into production, readability should be your preferred option such that you can go through your code, read it, understand it, and if there are bugs, troubleshoot it easily. Larger production scripts should be minimized. So when you have a larger production script, you should also learn on how to minimize. So the bottom line is that you as a programmer you are in the seat to decide on which recommendation or which convention or style guide that you may want to stick with and use in your everyday use of JavaScript programming language. The purpose is that it helps to keep code readable and also make it easy to debug your code in case there are errors or exception in your code or projects.